Hi everyone, welcome back to our small engine repair tutorial. Today we have this Victa 2-stroke V35 Commando. It's made in Australia. It's quite interesting to show you how to work with this unit. And I believe that this unit is still in its original parts and its condition. And it's leaking fuel on the primer and obviously it's not working. And I'll show you what is the trick and easy way to fix that. But it's not only what we want to fix this one, but I'll show you how to fully rebuild this carburetor. Let's get started. Okay, what will happen if we open the tap? Oh, okay. So that's the problem now. The fuel is leaking through the primer. So what do you think why the fuel is leaking? What's the problem? You tell me. No? So the problem when the fuel is leaking, it will flood the carby. It will also flood the engine and won't start. So before it starts to leak, it will also fill up the carburetor inside with fuel and before it leaks. So I'll show you what's the quick and easy way to fix this one. And what we have is it's called a magic needle. It's a Brighton tip. This is the new type of needle that we developed and manufactured. Now we replace this one with this Brighton tip. Okay, you have the float, you have the old needle, and replace this one with the Brighton tip. Float, and we just put it back. Make sure that it's on a horizontal position. And make sure that you don't cross-thread the jet. Fuel back. Let's clean that one first, and let's open it. Okay, let's wait for another 1 minute. We'll see what happens. So aside from waiting for the fuel to drain, we'll check for the spark. To check for the spark, just remove the spark plug and place it into the spark plug bolt. It's like a nail inside, so just contact with that and then place the spark plug against the chassis. But make sure that you wear your gloves or it's not in bare hand when you're holding this one, because when you pull the pull starter while holding that spark plug, it will definitely give you a shock and it's very nasty and painful. And just make sure that you hold the spark plug against the body and then just pull the starter. And that's definitely, there's no spark at all. Okay, so aside from having a fuel leaking through the primer pump, we don't have a spark as well. So using a multimeter, you set the multimeter to ohms if you have a multimeter. So what we're testing here is we have to test the ignition coil, secondary, or the high voltage winding of the ignition coil, to test the ignition coil, you just test the resistance between the coil pin contact inside and the body of the chassis of the engine. So make sure that you have at least 15 kilo ohms of resistance reading. So at the moment there's no reading at all, so that's definitely ignition coil is faulty, and this is a fair bit of job to do this one. Aside from fixing the leaking of the fuel primer, we have to fully rebuild the carburetor just to make sure that everything is working properly, or everything is fixed on the carburetor part, as well as we have to replace the ignition coil. I have a spare ignition coil as well, so I'll show you in a moment, but at the moment it's no reading at all. So that's how you quickly test the ignition coil, and I will make another video to show you properly how to test ignition coil for a Victa 2-stroke engine, including the contact pin, the two contact pin that the switch off the engine. And what's that contact pin? Because when you measure the contact pin between the two pin, whether shorted or not, you always have a zero reading. So how do you test the two pins? So I'll show you on a separate video. So subscribe to our channel and for more updates, and thanks anyway. Okay, for now you see that there's no leaking at all. So you see what's the difference and how good it is using the Vtech tip to quickly easily fix that problem. So let's move forward, and we'll replace the ignition coil, and then we will rebuild the carburetor. So to remove the ignition coil, we need to tilt this engine and remove the whole engine. But to be safe, it's better to remove the cowling and also the fuel tank. So we need to remove the cowling part. Okay, we need to tilt the engine, and we will support the front. So using a socket M24, just remove this bolt here that holds the blade's carrier. And using the M12, just undo all these 3 bolts there that holds the engine. And make sure that you hold the engine while undoing the bolts. So you'll notice that one screw is longer than the other two. The longer one is the one that is close to the muffler. So aside from these 3 bolts there that holds the engine, we also need to remove that bolts that is mounted close to the carburetor side. That's very tough, very hard to remove. So we use the larger impact wrench. Now it's coming off. Okay, let's remove the engine. Okay, it's easy to work from the other side when you remove the engine. So let's remove the engine. So here we go. So we have the engine here, and we have the ignition coil. So it's easy to work on the ignition coil when you remove the engine. Okay, let's remove the ignition coil. So first is you need to remove the stop switch on this side here. Down first, and then the other side. So this one has the plug So using a M12, undo these two bolts here that holds the ignition coil. So this old ignition coil, and we will replace that with a new one. It's not new, it's a spare one. First is we need to clean the contact of the, you can use sandpaper or steel brush. And also on the flywheel side. Okay, to set the gap, the gap between here and the magnet, is we have this clear binding film, which has a thickness of 0.18 millimeter. So you can use any of the, as long as closer to the contact of the magnet, and also it doesn't touch it. So just cut roughly 20 mm of width all the way. And what you do is place this one in between the ignition coil and the flywheel. Then bolt. Now you can remove the clear film. So we have the gap there with at least the thickness of this film. Okay, let's assemble the motor. Okay. Okay, to install it back, so we just screw all the bolts there, and the long screw will be right on the manifold, and also this bolt here that's closer to the carburetor. So we just screw it back. Okay, let's try to start the engine. And the stop switch there, contact is not currently not put back properly. So to stop the engine, if it runs, we just take this spark plug out. Okay, great. Okay, I think that's all good, and we don't have to rebuild the carby. We will rebuild the carby on the other video, maybe on a different unit, but for this one, I'm sure you'll say why rebuild the carby if it's already working, and the only problem is the primer is leaking. So we fixed that already. We fixed the ignition, so there's no reason to rebuild the carby. And besides, when I check the stop plug and the boot cover, it's all good, it's not perish, so I can say that everything is inside, it's working good. I can see that there's fuel leaking on around the starter assembly, so that's definitely it's leaking through that starter o-ring, so we need to replace that o-ring as well. So this starter assembly, so this o-ring here, because it's leaking through that housing there, so we need to replace this o-ring. Okay, let's clean this one. It is very important to replace that o-ring on the starter, because that's where the fuel is stored on the first half of the cycle, so before it goes into the combustion engine. So also main thing is why this still leaking fuel on the bottom of the primer cap is because the primer cap is already warped, and I think it's best to replace the primer cap with a new one. So make sure that you don't lose the needle. So let's remove that o-ring on the primer cap, and you see when you place a primer cap, it's not sitting properly, it's moving, so you have this gap on the side of the primer cap. So whereas the new primer cap, if place a new primer cap, is just fit exactly firmly without any movement at all, so there's no gap on around it. So it's best to replace this with the new primer cap and o-ring as well. And we have this needle. That's where the needle is, and the float. So we still have a fair bit of little bit of fuel, and just lubricate the o-ring so it's easy to put it in. So just place the new primer cap with horizontal line. It's right on the horizontal, on the jet. The jet is you have to clean the jet. It's clean and dirt. So this is a plain jet, and place the cowling back. Okay, so put your line in, then turn on the tap. Thanks for watching our video repair tutorial for today. I hope you enjoy our video repair tutorial for this Victa 2-stroke V35 Commando. And please don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Leave a comment. I would like to hear from you. And thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.